Woo! The Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star here late at night. This is getting released on a Thursday. Not that you missed anything on Wednesday, because you got a full hour and a half episode with the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy and I. But I've got a few questions in this one. This one's going to get a little weird. Well, maybe not weird, but this one's, well, it's going to get interesting. And we're going to be dealing far more with things that are quasi-tech related. But I think you'll see what I mean. And certainly we'll get into some science on all of this. So why don't we just go ahead? I mean, let's just open it up. Let's get through this. Some great questions here. But let's start it off. So I've got like 3 that I'm going to get through, and I don't know that any of these are going to be fun. We'll see how that all shapes up. But anyway, here we go. So, well, you know what? Real fast. How about that Zencash price, baby? Who told you months ago that, hey, you might want to check out Zencash because you don't know what's going to happen? 200% rise today. Woo! And of course, I'm recording this on, and that doesn't mean that it's going to stick for right now, but I'm recording this on the 19th, October 19th, 2017. So how about it, baby? And it was great. I got so many people that messaged me, that commented in the, I didn't say anything. In fact, I wasn't even paying attention to the price. Just other people said, hey, whoa, Stallion, good call on Zencash. I got people private messaging me on Twitter. And just in the Sovereign Tech Uncensored Facebook group, it was really something. And by the way, if you didn't get it, if for some reason someone listening to the sound of my voice has not signed up yet for the Sovereign Tech newsletter, the latest issue finally came out this week, and I've got another one lined up that's going to come out pretty rapid fire, because we got crazy stuff, or I have crazy. My schedule next week is just going to be fucking nuts. Because I have a conference. I'm going to be going to the Monage conference in Boston. That'll be from the 24th to the 26th. So that's next week. And it's a conference that's all about AI, cryptocurrencies, chatbots, all this other stuff. I'm not speaking, not that it wasn't offered to me. It was just I have other things that I'll be doing there. But yeah, it should be an interesting time. We'll see. So if you're in the area, if you're in Boston or in New England or whatever, and you want to go check out that conference, I think it's monage.io is the website. Anyway, next week is just going to be, just rapid fire. It's going to be nuts. All right. So finally, let us really get into this week's questions. And we'll start this one off. And this is from Twitter. Have you read Pinker's book, Better Angels of Our Nature? And if so, did you agree with what he said about prehistoric violent societies? So, okay, this is a book by Steven Pinker. This is a very popular book. In fact, some very good friends put a lot of stock, shall we say, in what gets laid out in it. And I've had my moments where, yeah, I get it. Where I agreed with it, maybe that the world was getting more peaceful and all this. And I may have briefly talked about it on Sovereign Tech in the past. My view has somewhat changed on what I think of Pinker's work. There's a lot of ways in which Steven Pinker, who is, I'm just going to say, he's a brilliant guy. That doesn't mean he's right. Intellectual brilliance is no guarantee of being, correct. Okay. Or is nothing it doesn't save you from being dead wrong in any case. And Steven Pinker is, like I said, he's brilliant. He has a few books out there now, I think. But one of the things in the Better Angels book that he describes is the idea that he's laying out is that in the past, humanity was incredibly violent. It was really, really bad. And and people are just offing each other en masse all the time. And his argument is that then he starts talking about the Enlightenment, which I'm not going to say that the Enlightenment was all bad. There are some very good things great things that came out of the Enlightenment. That doesn't mean it's all good either. And a lot of people ignore a lot of the darker aspects of the Enlightenment. You think the Jacobins, the Bolsheviks, these are direct outcrops, direct parts of the Enlightenment, and they are quite violent and quite vicious. So I don't exactly agree with him. I mean, right there, to say that the Enlightenment suddenly brought on what I think he calls like the long peace. No, that didn't happen. That wasn't even really starting. Like, a lot of people talk about it's just like Christians. When Christians talk about, and I don't mean to offend them. Look, this is just your history. Okay. When Christians talk about, oh yeah, when the Protestants finally broke away from the Catholic Church, finally we had the real word of Christ and it was going forward. Martin Luther did such an amazing thing with the 95 Thesis. It was phenomenal. But then they completely leave out the point that the Baptists and the Anabaptists were offing each other in record numbers. I mean, there was bloody civil wars within Protestantism, let alone what the Catholic Church was doing to things like the Waldensians and some others. Okay. The Protestant movement was far from peaceful, not even remotely close to being able to be called peaceful. It's just not true. It's not true at all. The Protestants, because some of the arguments that gets made against the Catholic Church by the Protestants, especially in that day, was that, oh, the Catholics are killing us. Oh, the Catholics are so violent. And I'm not saying they weren't, but the Protestants were literally just as bad and just as tyrannical as anything that the Holy Roman Empire did at that time. Okay. Now, the same, not that proof is not that proof by analogy is proof, but that is very much an analogy for what happened with the Enlightenment. Oh, suddenly there's this revolution in science and all these things that happened. That doesn't mean that suddenly, everything instantly got better and that everything that came out of the Enlightenment was hunky dory and was, replacing, these ancient violent ways with science and peace. No, that didn't happen. Like I said, I mean, the two easiest examples to look at are the Bolsheviks and the Jacobins. But regardless, anyway, so his claim is that really what has brought, Enlightenment ideas, okay, has brought on a lot more empathy and altruism and things like this, okay, and that because the state has grown so large and has such a near monopoly on force that the world really is getting more peaceful. And like I said, I think he calls it the long peace that we're achieving, where at some point there's just going to be like this everlasting peace, or like this, where war suddenly becomes, suddenly goes out of fashion, which, believe me, I wish it would. But here's the irony, in my opinion, all right, so this person's asking about what he said about ancient civilizations as compared to today. So, real quick, I just want to say, as far as today, like, do I agree with what Pinker had to say? Not anymore, because I don't have, there is no evidence that, like, for a little while it seemed like it, but and it's not Trump. It was Obama as well. It's been all kinds of people where, these wars, okay, yeah, we don't have World War III, but we have a billion little proxy wars. You have, the world is, you could just look at the amount of, list off, instead of looking at, like, say, maybe the death toll or something within, like, military reported numbers, which, let me assure you, as somebody that was in the U.S. military, this is one of the very first things I learned, is that if CNN reports that 1,000 people died in Iraq, it's actually 5,000. So Pinker's little divination with the numbers is probably bullshit. Okay. As far as like the amount of people dying, saying that somehow it's lessened. No, there's probably just a lot less getting reported as far as that goes. Yeah. Okay. So, and even so, like, maybe squad numbers aren't decreasing and, we're not losing so many military men or something. Well, yeah, it's because they're having drones do the dirty deed now. And you really don't get accurate counts, in West Bumfuck in Afghanistan. Okay. Or you go into any, and I don't say that as an insult to the Afghanis. All right. But I say quite the opposite, as I feel bad for them. Okay. You don't get a lot of these accurate counts. And that gets to a larger point that I want to get to here. Okay. But this is the idea that particularly ancient civilizations. So, all right. What Pinker was decrying was that a lot of anthropologists and sociologists, okay, they would go and they'd study the Inuit. They would study, some of these different hunter-gatherer tribes and these other people, and they would find that they would be generally peaceful. And so the argument goes is that, originally humans are very peaceful. And when we lived our hunter-gatherer primitivist ways, we weren't violent. And Pinker comes out with his book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, and says, no, actually, these people were, these ancient tribes were incredibly violent, and we're only getting better now. We don't need to look to the past to find peace. We need to look to the future and just keep going on the path that we're on. This is Pinker's argument, in a nutshell. I disagree with Pinker. He brings up, he does call bullshit on some very accurate things, like the fact that, violent deaths in the Inuit are commonplace when they were said that they were not. So I get those points. Okay. But you really are constantly running into, a lot of evidence that, now I'm not saying that ancient humans or medieval humans or, whatever era you're talking about with Pinker, I am not saying that they were super peaceful. Yeah, the Aztecs were, engaging in sacrifice. In certain civilizations, women were treated like shit. That all of these things are, were absolutely true and happened. Okay. Here's kind of here's the odd difference with this. I think that, I'm open to, I think that there were points and we have, there's only so many records that you can run off, right? Like you can only use the works of Herodotus and, and some other texts, which are quasi-religious at best, that claim, but there's enough of them where they claim that humanity once had this golden age. You even get something similar out of Torah or, out of the Bible where you have the Garden of Eden, right? And that life was really peaceful there and all this. And you get these, there's too many historians, be it in Greek culture, and in others, even like in India, where they talk about these eras, it seems, or even in Chinese mythology, Japanese mythology with the kami and some others, and not commies as in communists, as in Kami. These are like these Japanese, these ancient beings. Okay. But you keep getting these stories of where at one point humanity did live this very peaceful kind of communal life. Read into that what you want, okay? Because really, if you're looking for a villain, you'll find one. If you're looking for heroes, you're going to find those, right? That's the truth for most people. Most people aren't actually very good at being objective. Libertarians are about the worst at being objective because as soon as they see socialism, they just instantly think evil. I understand why you feel that way, but guess what? That doesn't inherently mean evil. People can choose to live with different economic models than the free market. I'm not saying that's a good idea, but they're allowed to, and they can. And sometimes on a small enough scale, it might even work for them. Actually, I can say that it works for them. You want to talk about ancient civilizations? We could talk about the Incas, where socialism seemed to work damned well for them. Not having money seemed to work damned well for them. But you have to be open, you have to be willing to actually read that research, to look into it and read about it, because Walter Block's not going to talk about it because it throws his theories out the door. All right. So anyway, and look, I'm not making a case for living like ancient humans or something like that. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is that ancient humans, I think, had perhaps a better perspective than what Pinker has on how civilization works. Okay. And this is evidenced not only in the writing of ancient humans, and ancient humans is a very broad term that could mean anything from the Romans to, one could even argue that that's anything pre-Enlightenment, but let's just say, it could be Romans and back, whatever. And going back from that, whatever various empires you want to talk about, the Medo-Persians, go down, the Greeks, go down the list. Okay, the Babylonians, you take your pick, even the Sumerians. So what you do find out from them is, and this is very interesting, particularly with the Romans, it's very telling, okay, and also with the Egyptians. What you do find in their writings is an understanding that what Pinker would call this civilizing, I think he calls it like a civilizing force, where, once you advance technologically, or, and once the state has more power and all of this, that, suddenly like everybody just becomes a little more peaceful and a lot more altruistic because there's so many things being provided for them, and they're not worried about having to defend themselves because the state's kind of doing it for them, and things just sort of naturally go, become more peaceful. No, they recognize that when there's these improvements in civilization, whatever they may be, including maybe social improvements, that these things come and go. There's an understanding throughout human history, especially ancient human history. I'm not talking Paleolithic, we're talking Neolithic and up, okay? But throughout ancient human history, you have what seems to be a very clear understanding that any improvement that gets made, any new empire that comes along can just disappear. And they could fall back into a state of not anarchism. Well, I mean, maybe it could be defined as anarchism, but they'd fall into a state where there is, little to no state, in these conditions. Now, the best evidence for the fact that humans understood this, that these social improvements, look, real quick, here's a great example. We know that the Romans were far more, like every Roman was effectively a social justice warrior. Okay. And in fact, because there's that ugly narrative out there that, like Nero and Caligula and these other people who were full on hedonists and whatever else, that they're the reason that the Roman Empire fell. No, actually, the Roman Empire didn't fall until like almost 100 to 200 years after those guys were in power. The Roman Empire fell because of Christianity. The Roman Empire fell because Christianity said, don't worry about this life, worry about the afterlife. And so the empire went into disrepair. It is not because of Nero letting things burn while he plays the whatever, the fiddle or whatever the fuck he was playing, the harp. It's not because of Caligula. It's not because of, anything like that. But anyway, if one is to, and you don't have to accept this, I understand why you wouldn't, but let's just put it out there. If one is to accept that there is being kind to gay people or to, like different types of relationships, polyamory or whatever, or that orgies are suddenly okay when before they weren't, or anal sex is suddenly okay when before it wasn't, things like this. Rome was probably further ahead than we are now in a very real sense. I mean, there's some oddities, like they didn't think blowjobs were a good thing. Very strange. Okay. But there was really, they were very, very socially ahead of what we are today. And look, you don't have to take my word for that. There's plenty of historians, anthropologists, and others that'll will inform you, okay, of this. And that's really not what brought the empire down. If anything, that's what made the empire even bigger and more rich, more wealthy, was because of the acceptance of multiculturalism, the acceptance even of other religions, the acceptance of all kinds of things. I mean, that's how Christianity got a foothold, because eventually, it also became Religio Franca, but these things were allowed, okay, to exist in some form or other. And generally, a lot of these different cultures were largely given in the Roman Empire, were largely given agency to handle their own problems the way they did. That's why the Jews could have the Sanhedrin, even though eventually, they'd have to pay homage to some Roman governor in Judea or something like this. But they more or less, unless there was something really, really bad, they handled their shit internally. Okay. And that's another way that the Roman Empire, kind of stayed in power for so long, is because they let all these other cultures handle their own shit, and anyway, so yeah, that's dead wrong that hedonism or degeneracy or anything like that is what brought down the Roman Empire. That fucking didn't happen. Okay. Christians brought down the Roman Empire. Understand that. Some Christians see that as a good thing. Other people see that as, oh, fuck, that put us behind 1,000 years. Well, take your pick. But regardless of this, my point in saying that is that, yes, socially, there were, talk about a civilizing force. Rome could be argued, based upon your metrics, that the Roman Empire was this incredibly civilizing force, but it disappeared. And you ended up falling back to the barbaric tribes. This is my point, is that ancient civilizations, ancient humans knew these improvements can come and go. They don't stick. Okay. Now, The biggest way, and this is what I was going to get to, the biggest way, the biggest piece of evidence that shows how they understood this, have you ever wondered why even in like ancient Egypt, even in Samaria, you look at cities like Uruk, okay, and some of these other ones, like Uruk is the first city, they had the ability to make things not in stone. Okay, like they could have made their monuments, they could have made their homes, they could have made all their cities, their buildings, whatever. Ancient humans, for a very long time, for thousands of years, could have used something other than stone. Why do you think they used stone to make all this shit? Why do you think they made these monuments so huge? Why do you think, that they put in all the man hours when it was completely impractical, and they weren't stupid, they knew that it was impractical. Why did they bother to do that? Because they knew that stone was the thing that lasts. Stone is, building things out of stone. That means that as civilizations come and go, as empires rise and fall, their monuments would last. And they have. That's why we still have them. It's why we still have the pyramids. It's why we still have so many things. They knew. And this goes way back. That humans had this understanding that all of these improvements, can be very ephemeral. They can just disappear at any given moment. It's one of my arguments for, the oldest civilization that we can really keep track of goes back further than Uruk and Sumer. That goes back to Göbekli Tepe. And Göbekli Tepe is, this temple that was unearthed that's some odd, 10,000, it's almost 13,000 years old. It depends. Some people gauge it to be significantly older than that. Here's the unique thing about this temple that they found that is still really rewriting the archaeology books. The interesting thing about it is that this temple at Göbekli Tepe was buried, intentionally buried. Why? Why would you intentionally bury that? Because this is speculation, certainly on my part, but I don't think it's an unfair one when you look at the rest of ancient civilizations, because they knew that eventually, the marauders, whatever else, would come through and they would destroy it. That civilization comes and goes, peace comes and goes, okay, and that there's nothing that you can really do about that. They had a deep understanding of human nature, far deeper than we do today, because today we base our human nature on what we read in Wikipedia. We base our human nature on what Steven Pinker says. We base our, as to where then, no, they had to deal with people mano a mano, shall we say. And they understood human beings far better, and look, most of the philosophies that people still subscribe to today come from these ancient peoples. It doesn't come from people today. It comes from ancient peoples. Why? Because they had such a deep understanding of the human condition. Doesn't mean that it was better. It just means that it doesn't mean that somehow their life was better because they had a better understanding of the human condition. It just meant that they were a little more honest with themselves and they weren't lying or fudging the numbers or putting too much faith, perhaps. Ooh, faith in the numbers like Steven Pinker does. This is classic stuff. For example, during the Enlightenment, which Pinker is such a big fan of. Okay, look, I'm not against the Enlightenment. I'm just saying that it's not all, sunshine and rainbows. Okay. During the Enlightenment, you had a character named John Dee. Now, John Dee is a very interesting character, and I'd love to talk about him quite a bit more. He is kind of the patriarch in a real way to Sir Francis Bacon, who is an incredibly seminal figure in human history, I think. And John Dee is also, a lot of people don't know this. In a way, he's kind of the basis for James Bond. For 007, that's how John Dee would sign things, was with 007, and he was effectively a spy and kind of spiritual consult to Queen Elizabeth. This is during the Enlightenment times here. John Dee was also, there's two arguments on this. Either John Dee was nuts, or he had a very serious motive that he was trying to, he was trying to push an idea. And what I think, my belief on what was going on with John Dee. I think he actually, part of the Enlightenment was like alchemy and everything, divining spirits and trying to control all this other stuff, Emerald Tablet, the law of attraction, making Philosopher's Stone, all this wacky shit, right? Buying into a lot of maybe secrets of Pythagoras that some of that isn't widely available to people today. So, all kinds of wild shit. Okay. I think John Dee genuinely bought into a lot of that. But the claim is that later, and look, this is how big of an intellectual John Dee was. I think arguably he had the largest library in the world at the time. And I mean, this was a genuinely brilliant guy. What happened to him that suddenly he starts thinking, because later on in his life, he ends up claiming that he's talking to angels and all this other stuff. He loses his entire fortune. It's a very tragic second half of otherwise what could be seen, especially in a conventional sense, a brilliant life. What I think happened is that John Dee knew that, and I think he was freaked out about this. And certainly, the woman that he worked for, Queen Elizabeth, probably wasn't too happy about this either. John Dee, I think, knew that with the Enlightenment, with science and the age of reason and all these things, coming into play, that I think he knew that eventually science would prove that humanity, that the universe does not revolve around humanity. Okay, that we are just he didn't know we were a pale blue dot, but he kind of had the abstract concept that, wow, science is going to prove that our action really doesn't have a whole lot of meaning in the universe, which science in a way really does prove that in a way. And I think that he spent the second half of his life doing everything he can, spending all of his money, making up bullshit stories about talking to angels and all this other shit to try and comfort the authority at his, in his time, Queen Elizabeth and whoever else, that no, you still have divine power. What you say matters and has ramifications throughout eternity and space. And because, when you, for a lot of human beings, this is why a lot of people, I think, fall into religion. I've had very intelligent people I consider friends, that straight up told me they are so uncomfortable with the concept that once they die, that there's nothing after that they just accept religion and the concept of an afterlife as a comfort, because they just can't accept that it ends that way. Doesn't matter that there's no evidence for what they're talking about. No evidence whatsoever. Nothing that would stand up to the scientific method. Speaking of Francis Bacon, regardless that they can't find that, they still stick with it. And that's the thing. Humans will, if they are that uncomfortable, they will come up with all the horse shit in the world. All right. And I think that just like John Dee started coming up with stuff, I think that a lot of people, statisticians, people that read statistics, okay, guys like Pinker who look at all these numbers and do what is effectively divination, much like John Dee with his angels did, looks at these numbers and say, humanity is getting better. Everything's going to be all right. Don't you worry about a thing. The long peace is on its way. But really, those numbers are either forgeries, or they don't tell the entire story, or there are bits and pieces, being left out whole cloth. So, yeah, I'm not saying that he's wrong, that ancient civilizations or ancient humans, maybe tribal peoples, whatever, were very violent. Where I do think he's wrong is that somehow we are becoming more peaceful. I don't buy that. And you just have to look at the summer of 2017 with everything that happened in the United States. And I think you get a pretty clear picture. We are nowhere near the long peace. We're not even close. Not even close. And this is one of the reasons that I say this all the time, okay, that you're never going to have an anarchist Earth. Like, you're never going to have libertarian paradise across the entire planet. You've got two choices. One is you get a few people together, you buy, a little place, whatever, or maybe a big place. I was talking to Pixel, Paige Peterson, just the other day, just had dinner with her. And in fact, we had an awesome time. There was a crypto party in Nashua that she held. That was just tremendous. I'll be talking about it on the Sovereign Tech Prime episode this week. But we were talking, and she went to, what's that place called? Hold on, I've got a sticker for it here. Woo, you're hearing me talking from a long distance. Hold on, I got to move my 3DS. I always forget the name of it, and I'm probably going to butcher how it's originally pronounced. But anyway, Paralini Polis, that's the Institute of Crypto Anarchy, where like you go. We read about this in a Guardian article and how crypto anarchy is winning. I do agree crypto anarchy is winning, but that doesn't mean just because like a cultural movement or force or technological force is winning doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to take full advantage of it, to where they can do something with it. Anyway, the Institute of Crypto Anarchy, sure, it's this huge building. She was describing it to me where, you can only buy things in there with Bitcoin and Litecoin. They have all these crazy events and, and people just do their thing there. So that's something that you can do. You can buy a specific area of land. You could do kind of like temporary autonomous zones. You can look those up on DuckDuckGo. You'll find out about it. Or permanent autonomous zones. And you could have your little anarchist paradise and you can live 99% of the way to anarchy doing that. Okay. But you're never, and the second option is go to fucking outer space. Go colonize in the prime asteroid belt, find yourself a nice asteroid, set up a dome, and, have all your lovers and whatever else and rock and roll, and do that. Those are, in my opinion, your two options if you want to live an actual, like, full-on anarchist or something remotely close to a full-on anarchist life. You're not going to have an entirely anarchist Earth because I agree with the ancient humans, not with Steven Pinker, that these things come and go. These time frames of peace and whatever else. I mean, and he's even like, it's so crazy. And this is, such an old argument. Look, anarchism doesn't promise utopia. Okay. Even if the world was more peaceful because of a near monopoly of the use of force by governments around the world, that monopoly use of force is completely unethical. It's just it's totally unethical. No one is promising that a world without government is somehow going to be, this free market paradise. I would argue that it probably, especially right now, it wouldn't be if we just turned everything over. You gotta make that point really, really clear. Never, ever. You're going to lose people to the concept of anarchism if you start telling people that, it's going to be amazing, the free market's going to come up with this, because then, a very logical question for them to ask is, well, how? You don't have the answer for that. No, you don't. I like to consider myself a smart fellow, and I don't have all the answers for that. And so that's why when I talk about anarchism, I don't sell it as, the world would be amazing. I don't sell it as a utopia. I sell it, on the concepts of a degree of right and wrong. And the state's existence is inherently wrong. It's unethical. Now, I fancy myself an egoist, and ethics is kind of a dicey conversation to have within all of that. Of course, I base it upon biological universals, not necessarily the concept, this abstract notion of rights or ethics. Okay, but for conventional or for ease of terms, I'm just speaking of it this way. That's a whole other conversation, really to be had on that. So even if Pinker was right, he's wrong. It's not okay that people are more peaceful because the government, holds all the guns. Here's another analogy. I get fucking annoyed when people talk about gun rights. No, it's property rights. Straight up. That's all it is. Guns just property. Don't argue for guns. Argue for property. And have guns be a part, have guns be in the conversation, just by proxy, just as a byproduct. You lose the instant you start talking about guns, just like you lose status if you're trying to turn them into anarchists. You lose them once you start promising them utopia because you can't prove that. So anyway, like I said, to answer the question, I don't think Pinker's necessarily wrong. I do think that he is leaving out a lot of evidence, or what could be counted as evidence, that points that there was a time in ancient history where humanity was very peaceful. I think he ignores that, but a lot of his other evidence, I think, stands up as far as with ancient humans, because he's in the debunking process. So, but then once he tries to get into not the debunking process, but trying to prove his thesis, okay, that now somehow we're far more peaceful, that's where things fall apart. And that's where his little, and I think he's just, he is uncomfortable with the idea of, it's amazing. Like, you can almost psychologize him and how he's running to the state, and he's uncomfortable with the concept that, wow, the state is just taking over so much more of our lives, which I think he's either consciously or unconsciously realizing. But he can't accept that things aren't getting better because of that, because otherwise, well, he'd probably have to become an anarchist. And he doesn't want to do that. That's an uncomfortable thought. So, yeah, I don't buy, I can somewhat accept what he said about some ancient, not all, but some ancient peoples. But I sure as fuck don't buy what he says about the modern world. Not anymore. There was a time where I was kind of sold on it, but no longer. No longer. And I mean, then there's just too much evidence that stands now, especially since that book originally came out, which is just a few years ago, that no, this doesn't happen. The ancient humans were right. Civilization, civilizing forces, long pieces and all this stuff, this shit comes and goes all the time. And it'll probably always be that way. So whatever you build in stone, like they did, right? Anyway, that's a very long answer to that question. In fact, so long, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to all three of the. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to all three of the questions for this week. But let's get on to the next one. Now, actually, I'll read it here in its entirety. Here's something for the Q&A. What are your thoughts on the electric universe theory? I looked into it on a surface level years ago, but it's recently popped back up on my radar. I'm open to the idea of alternative theories, but this one doesn't seem to have much, if any, evidence backing it up. I understand the urge to be skeptical of currently accepted theories as an all-encompassing explanation of the universe, since science continuously advances and explanations do change, but the electric universe theory doesn't look like it adds up. What do you think? Okay, so great question. I actually, believe it or not, I covered this. I guess this would have been February 9th. I'll put a link in the show notes in a previous, in a previous Q&A, Patreon Q&A. In fact, it was Q&A number 30, which was Sovereign Tech subscriber episode 57. Okay. And it was for patrons only. And I covered it in the last 15 minutes. Okay. I'll put a link in if you want to hear what I originally said, about it. And I mean, my bottom line with it. So what I said then is really still applicable now. And what I mean by this is that what I said at the time, I guess this would have been, almost a year ago, maybe almost 2 years ago. I don't know however long it's been. I can't keep track of that. But in episode 57, in Patreon episode, I guess I should say, number 57, again, it was Q&A number 30. What I said there is, like, this isn't something that I've looked into a bunch, and it's not. I read Eric Lerner's book that was very, very popular. What was it? The Big Bang Didn't Happen. And that came out in the 90s. And it's so funny because I get so many people that tell me, oh, you should read this book. I mean, don't assume I've read everything, because obviously I haven't. That's impossible. But if it's like an alternative theory kind of book, even honestly, like I get annoyed when people say something like, you should read this. And in fact, maybe it's the way they say it is that, oh, well, if you're into it, you should read this. Like, oh yeah, you haven't checked this out. And it's like, shut the fuck up. I have read it. I read it when I was a fucking kid. And I describe it in the audio. Again, it's like the last 15 minutes of Q&A number 30 there. Link will be in the show notes for that. I don't want to retread all of that ground, but I mean, I've read Eric Lerner's book. I am totally, understand this first off, I am totally on board with alternatives to the Big Bang Theory. I think the Big Bang Theory, as in the creation of the universe, not the terrible TV show, I think the Big Bang Theory has a lot of problems. I bring them up often on Sovereign Tech, that I don't buy it. Okay, I don't accept the theory. I can run with it, and I'm very knowledgeable about it, and I can talk about it. And I'm not saying it's the worst theory out there, but yeah, I don't. There's huge. I mean, it's not like, okay, well, there's only one or two problems, but otherwise it's pretty spot on. So let's run with it. No, sometimes those one or two problems, and there's more than one or two, but sometimes there's one or two problems that are so massive that they can't be ignored. Okay. And the one that I bring up often enough with the Big Bang Theory is that there should not be, if there was a central point where the universe began, as in where suddenly, boom, where bang, the Big Bang occurred, you should not have uniform temperature in the universe, no matter how far away from Earth you are or from whatever maybe the center of the universe was, whatever. You should not have uniform temperature, but you do. that's a problem. Okay. Now, plasma cosmology, or what's called the electric universe theory, is really what it's pretty much saying is that how to put this. So in generally in physics, modern physics really hinges on gravity. In fact, there's been some incredible recent announcements around this that I might get into in Sovereign Tech Prime. Okay, but it really hinges on gravity as being sort of the main force, and much like, you know, an anarchist should measure all things by the individual, you know, modern physics, astrophysics, measures everything by gravity, really. Okay. Now, the electric universe theory has an alternative to that, and they're saying that ionized gases and plasmas, pretty much, which is why they call it plasma cosmology, that these are really the driving forces of the universe, and it kind of, you know, and it changes everything. Okay. Now, here's the problem. And Eric Lerner, who I mentioned earlier, who is one of the more, I mean, this is a theory that goes back to the 60s, okay, back when, you know, there was still a lot of argument as to what, you know, how did the universe come into being? You know, the scientists really were arguing about this. Was it the steady state theory? You know, was it plasma cosmology, which at the time was called Elfin-Klein cosmology? You know, was it that, or was it this Big Bang? And there's a bunch of other theories too, you know, that were out there that were really being hammered out. The Big Bang theory ended up winning, and really that's it. It just won a contest. It's not like it's the best representation of the evidence. I think it's a better representation of the evidence than the electric universe theory. One of the huge problems with the electric universe theory, and it's what I brought up in Q&A number 30 for Sovereign Tech patrons, was that it really does not give a very good answer for cosmic, for the CMB, for the cosmic, background, microwave background radiation. It just doesn't. It just really doesn't address it at all. And I know that Eric Lerner tried, to give some kind of answer, to how that works. But really, I mean, what happens there is that it just doesn't. His answer to that doesn't match with the same precision, really, that the Big Bang theory does. So yeah, look, and the question asker hit it. Like he says, look, I think people, are just kind of, always looking, because science is constantly changing and they're always looking for like that next thing. I mean, I'll take it a step further. I think there's a lot of people, especially in libertarianism and anarchism, that are just trying to be edgelords. It doesn't really have to do with the evidence. I think this is why so many people in libertarianism, and especially ANCAPism, why they fall for the flat earth theory, why they fall for all kinds of like just nonsense, things that have no evidence to back it up. And the question asker said it didn't look like the electric universe theory had a whole lot of evidence behind it, and that's because it doesn't. It also doesn't really have a whole lot of, and look, I don't want to get into the fallacy of appeal to authority, but it doesn't have a whole lot of respected, shall we say, academics involved with it. When here's the thing, is that there are very respected academics who do hold alternative theories and espouse and write often about alternative theories to the Big Bang theory. One, and look, if I sound like a broken record, it's because I just, anytime these kinds of questions come up, I just want to show you, look, I'm not shilling for the Big Bang theory or big science or something. I'm an atheist, but I don't, I agree that there are problems with the Big Bang theory and that alternative theories really need to be explored. I'm not saying we know the one that works. Right now, the theory that I think best fits a lot of the evidence, and it can mathematically, is the theory that came out of the University of Alberta a couple of years ago, which was that there wasn't even there's no Big Bang, but there's no beginning to the universe, at all. It's just always been here. And there are some fascinating, and that's still being very much explored and looked into. And I think that kind of theory is something that needs to be described, because it answers a lot of questions, particularly, like, why is there a uniform temperature throughout the universe? There's other stuff that needs to be described, but I think that that's a fascinating road to go down. So I'm not opposed. Like, if people want to get excited about electric universe theory, fine, fucking have a great time. Science needs to be done. Alternative theories, I'm totally on board with them. Just the electric universe theory doesn't convince me at all, actually. I'm far more interested. It's what's called the quasi-steady state theory. Really, before I heard that theory about the universe having no beginning, and not that they're the first people to say this, they're just kind of the first scientists to actually draw up a paper, and kind of do the work to show that could be true, as compared to people like Epicurus or others that just said no, it didn't have a beginning. Before then, the theory that I was running with mainly was what's called the quasi-steady state theory, which is a kind of an offshoot of a very popular theory from the 60s, from the same time that plasma cosmology was being developed, which was called the steady state theory. Now, the quasi-steady state theory is much like the Big Bang theory, except the difference is that instead of it being a Big Bang, there was a bunch of mini bangs that happened. And now the beauty of that is it solves one of the major problems with the Big Bang, is that it explains the uniform temperature because there were bangs happening all over the place. And so, yeah, you wouldn't measure, like, the temperature can be the same because it's not like stuff was coming from one center point and should be colder the further it goes out, instead of having the same temperature, and things closer would be hotter. I mean, like, that's just not how things should work. But the quasi-steady state theory, it has answers for that. It's not to say that that's perfect either, but it does have answers for that. And in fact, a very popular book, all right, correction. This is not a very popular book, but this guy did write a very popular book. The author, it was actually three authors, but the main one, Jayant Narlikar, he wrote a book in 2000. You can get this book. It's not going to be cheap, but it's called A Different Approach to Cosmology, From a Static Universe Through the Big Bang Towards Reality. And this whole book, which I read back then, goes into this whole theory that no, actually it wasn't one Big Bang. It was a bunch of mini bangs that occurred. And that explains some of the discrepancies in the data that you end up with, with the Big Bang, but also solves the issue of, okay, where is this cosmic microwave background radiation coming from? And it describes all of that. Now, the reason that I like to give that a little more validity, the quasi-steady state theory, is that understand Jayant Narlikar, this is the guy that if you go to college for physics classes, and of course for a lot of people are like, oh, well, college, they're going to college for it, fuck, they're already screwed, they're agents of the state, blah, blah, yeah, okay. Even Rothbard said, look, government, science is funded and done in government. If you want to be a scientist, you have to deal with it. It's not unethical for you to deal with them. Even Rothbard, your fucking holy Rothbard, told you that, yeah, guess what? Science is done by the government, but that's how it is right now, so that's how you're going to have to deal with it. That doesn't mean throw out science. Rothbard wouldn't. Why would you? Going on. So Jayant Narlikar wrote An Introduction to Cosmology. He's written a laundry book or a laundry list of books that are the textbooks that get used to teach people about, quantum physics, traditional, general relativity, special relativity, all of this. He is an absolute expert at what he does, and widely accepted as, a brilliant mind in all this. But he questions the Big Bang. And, again, has this book, A Different Approach to Cosmology. So, and that's just a crazy, fascinating read. If you can get a copy of it online, like at the quote unquote public library, maybe in PDF or EPUB format, by all means do so. And it's a tremendous read, but it's not going to give you the electric universe theory. He quashes that in a heartbeat. So, but anyway, my point being is that, yeah, I get it. People want to run off to alternative theories because, you get to the point when you're an anarchist or a libertarian or something, you get to the point, well, fuck, it's the New World Order's lying about everything. No. There's plenty of lies, sure, but you can catch them in those. I mean, with these, not every scientist in the world is some fucking like malicious actor trying to lie to you and disprove shit about you. Okay. They really do. A lot of them do genuine science. Now, I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm just saying they do genuine science, and some of them have the courage to question when things don't exactly fit. And that includes people that are into the electric universe theory too. Like I said, I don't mind that people want to dig into that. I don't find the evidence for it compelling. I think that there are problems. There are things that it doesn't solve. There are things that it tries to solve, but it doesn't solve as well as other theories. So yeah, it just doesn't hold much purchase with me. So I'm not really on board with it. And honestly, like that's exactly what I said, however long ago that was, a year ago or something, back in February. I don't think it was this past February, because I mean, well, maybe it was. I don't know. Maybe it's been that many weeks. I can't keep track. But that's exactly what I said then, was the same thing. It's like, look, I'm not an expert on this at all, and I don't find the evidence compelling enough to even try to become an expert. So, and it's not like it's because I'm not open to new theories. I just explained I'm very open to new theories. I'm open to the theory out of the University of Alberta. I was open to, after learning about either God created it or the Big Bang Theory, I was open to Giant Narlikar's work on the quasi-steady state theory. I'm always open to new theories on this stuff. I'm just saying the electric universe doesn't do jack shit for me. And in fact, some of the people, honestly, that espouse this, are like, I think they have a lot of obviously the electric universe theory goes well beyond anarchism and libertarianism, but some of the people that have some degree of voice that push this, they have very wacky ideas across the board. And I think that they're constantly looking for, the next whack. Like I said, they're trying to be edgelords. Okay, they're looking for that next wacky thing that they can, so that they can be a rebel, and they can think that, oh, I've got the complete truth. Oh no, this is all the anarchism. You're not really an anarchist if you don't believe in the electric universe theory. You're not really an anarchist if you're not a Holocaust denier. This is what these people buy into. I mean, it's sad when your rebelliousness takes you so far that you just don't believe anything or anyone anymore. Yeah, I don't even know where further really to go with that. So yeah, no, I don't buy. Bottom line, I don't buy into the electric universe theory. Again, it doesn't really address at all. I don't think it addresses the uniform temperature of the universe. It doesn't address the cosmic microwave background radiation, which I understand when the electric universe theory first came out, or plasma cosmology was first out there, like this whole idea of the CMB radiation was fairly new and not as well proven as it is now, like that it's actually out there. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. So, but some theories die hard, so whatever. Anyway, I had one more question that somebody sent in that I think is a fascinating subject really to get into, but I think we've already talked so much. And they wrote me an email and it just said, technology is a form of necromancy. Discuss. And while I would love to get into that right now, I think that that's something to save for next week. Or if you really want me to talk about it, we've got the live Q&A happening this Sunday, for patrons only. We do it on Hangouts. You can be, if you're a new patron, if you don't know about this, which by the way, thank you to the new patrons that have just signed up. You can actually join the Hangout. You can be on video or just audio if you want. You can be in there, or you can just hang out. A lot of people just hang out in the YouTube chat room, and I just read the questions from the chat room and I talk about it. There's a lot of ways you can go about it, and I put out the posts via Patreon, so pay attention to Patreon, or pay attention to your email for when those posts go out so that you can get the links to be able to hook up on it. But that's coming up this Sunday at 4 p.m. This will be October 22nd, and I'm really excited about that. So if you have questions on all this, we can talk about it then. That's for sure. So anyway, I think that'll do it for this episode. You got a new Sex and Science Hour that will be coming out. Very excited for that. Got a dynamite Sovereign Tech lined up. I mean, some really, really cool shit that we're going to talk about, and some troubling shit. We will be talking about, I don't know if we're going to get into Roca, but we will be talking about Crack, and that's Krack, okay, which is the Wi-Fi exploit that, the WPA2 exploit that was discovered recently. We will be talking about that, and I think it speaks to a very, very large issue that we will need to discuss, but we'll be discussing that on this week's Sovereign Tech Prime episode. Will that be episode 248? I think so. And again, like I said, if you're wondering where will be the next fictional episode, and it's going to be Soviet Tech 3, that's usually a Halloween episode. It's going to be a holiday episode. Like I've said, it'll be coming out, it'll probably be coming out around Thanksgiving, maybe even, it might even be a little bit later. I've been so busy with so many exciting stuff I have a new sponsor that I'll be announcing. I mean, like, there's just been a lot of great things happening for Sovereign Tech, and just in my own personal life too. A lot of really fulfilling work, I'll put it that way, that I've enjoyed. So, but yeah, we'll get this out. I've talked to all the ladies. All the ladies are totally on board with doing this. They love doing this with Sovereign Tech. They love entertaining everybody, and working with me. And I'm always so, again, honored and inspired by that, as I said before. So anyway, a lot of cool stuff coming up. User podcast, haven't forgotten about that either. It's just, I want this to be done right. I want this to be something very special for the patrons. So there it is. Woo! I will see you on the other side.